I'm a lesbian.
Do you even like women? Like, you kind of seem like you hate them.
I'm not gay. I just want to write a 10-hour symphony for her every day, every morning, and play it to her every night.
Me hanging out at Chuck E. Cheese with my crush.
If you
It's
yearn,
true.
you might just be a lesbian.
The world is built for men. We don't experience that privilege.
I'm not an equalist. I'm a feminist because it's femininity that is looked down upon.
There are gay men out there who perpetuate misogyny.
Swipe or no swiping.
No swiping. We just gotta put
Aw,
women
man.
on. We're safe. There are good men out there. Dare I say, all three of them.
Within dating, I feel this pressure to be really butch.
Are
on
you willing to
apps.
date a Gen Z?
Oh my.
Oh, yes.
I'm attractive. I'm confident. I am desired by all.
I like to be bullied. Turns me on.
I like getting my shit torn open. Like, get in line, bitch.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Queer Collective podcast. I'm your host, Carbon.
I'm Emily.
I'm J. Marie.
And I'm Eirene.
And welcome to the show. And this episode is sponsored by Vizzy Hard Seltzer and Field, but more on that later.
If you think lesbianism means woman loving woman, this episode might surprise you. Today, we're diving into the rich history of gender nonconformity in the lesbian community and ask who really gets to be called a lesbian. You'll hear firsthand from trans and non-binary lesbians as they share their experiences navigating identity, community tensions, and queer intimacy. Together, we explore how lesbianism has always been more expansive than the boxes we try to fit it into.
And our first guest is Eirene Cloma. They use they, them pronouns, who is a non-binary musician, army veteran, and creative leader originally from North Vancouver, BC. They are a member of the queer Filipinx Kulintang ensemble, Pantayo, whose debut album was shortlisted for the Polaris Music Prize. They perform under the solo moniker Louis Sanchez and released their debut record in November on Next Door Records. Go check them out. Eirene has over a decade experience in nonprofit management and community engagement and is currently finishing their Master of Education at U of T. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
That's quite the bio.
Our next guest is J. Marie Phillips, she, her pronouns, is a community program manager, DJ, artist, and producer. Born in Scarborough and raised in the Twin Islands of Trinidad and Tobago, J. Marie, also known as Pothound, all lowercase, is a woman of many hats. You can find her working with queer and trans youth at the community center during the week and playing soccer, hanging out at the skate park off the clock. Currently, she is working on her debut album, Video Garden. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Where we want to start is, what does it mean to be a lesbian? Lesbianism is more than a sexual orientation. But before we get into definitions that we found online from literature, can we go around the table and just say, what does it mean to be a lesbian to you? J. Marie?
Being a lesbian is about having a really big carabiner on your waist. And
That's true. Can confirm.
Either being really good at driving and handy or like completely useless, which is to say we contain multitudes.
On the second one, I don't drive, can't drive.
Passenger princess.
Very useless.
Yeah.
I think you bring many skills to the table that you don't even
Other
perceive.
skills,
Yes.
other skills. And I'm a great vibe. I bring the vibe.
Being a lesbian is about being a great vibe.
And correct. What about you?
I mean, I echo all those sentiments about the lesbian vibe. But in answering this question, I think about how the definition has changed with me as I've gotten older. So in the beginning, let's say before I started dating or in my early dating experiences, being a lesbianism to me was a lot about culture. And now that I've gotten older and I've been in many relationships with women, it's become more about the relationality of it. Like, how is that dynamic between me and my partner, me and my dates, me and my community and my friends? And I would say for most of my adult life, my community has been mostly sapphic.
I was identifying as a lesbian for like the last 6 years. Now I've like moved into like my bisexuality and everything, but part of moving into bisexuality was like very hard for me because of how strongly important sapphic spaces were to me. And it was a safe space away from cisgendered men, to be honest. As like someone who'd been like assaulted and had a lot of negative experiences with cis men, it's like it felt so safe to me to be in this entirely sapphic environment. As like I've moved into my bisexuality, I've realized that I can find that in queer environments as well, though. Before, people were angry at me because I was saying I'm a bisexual lesbian, because lesbian as like a political identity and as like a community identity, it still resonated to me, even though it wasn't aligned with my sexual identity, and it got kind of confusing for a minute there. But I've found the same level of safety and community just within the queer community as well.
Yeah.
You know?
They might still get mad at you now. Like, feel free to get mad.
Put it in the comments.
Yeah.
I like to be bullied. It turns me on. Just kidding.
Oh, we're doing this kind of podcast. Okay.
The way that I am a lesbian, I think, is in all regards. Like my sexuality, my gender, my political stance, everything. I don't think that lesbianism or being a lesbian or identifying as one is exclusive as some people might think. Some people think that it is a biological female who has sexual attraction or only has a sexual attraction to another biological female, which is very trans exclusionary and non-binary exclusionary. I think that lesbian is more than just who you're attracted to. Kind of like how queerness is something that you choose as an identity, because you can be gay, for example, and not be queer. Lesbian now, to me, has sort of transformed into that, is to also choose the identity, not just like a sexuality that you're born with. Does that make sense?
I think there are some people who use the lesbian identity though and don't see it in that
agree.
way.
Yeah, I do agree. Yeah. So it's not for everyone, and it's not something that we can like place as a blanket statement, because like how we can place queerness as like an identity that you choose. But that is what it means to me personally.
I wanted to even take a segue onto that point too, and just like
You wanted
highlight,
to elaborate beyond just what you said?
I actually wanted to.
I felt it was all encompassing.
Thank you. I think it was. But I actually wanted to hone in on the biological female element, which I think is an often used kind of term. But in reality, it is a bit of a red herring and a misnomer, because the truth is, if like a trans woman undergoes hormone therapy, undergoes certain surgeries, which you can choose all or none, technically they are biological females too. Because physiologically, you are functioning as a woman, as a female. And beyond that, you know, a lot of people are like, well, they can't have children, they can't reproduce. It's like, there's a lot of barren women out there who are, by your definition, biologically female, which is just to say that...
So not cisgender, but biologically female.
Yeah, well, it's just a misnomer of a term.
Right.
Because often it's a easy way for people to be like, well, you aren't a woman. Often with a lot of transphobia, transmisogyny specifically, it's what can seem on the surface as common sense. It's like, oh yeah, well, we shouldn't let trans women in sports because they have an advantage, even though all sports are rooted in biological advantages, you know? Of course. In some capacity. Yeah. And I think your point is still really great. I think that's a common perception of many, and I'm really excited to talk about this today, because I think we can really get into the weeds about like what that does mean and what it is beyond just our essence, you know, beyond like how we were born into this world. I think lesbianism is a quality of transcending yourself and transcending what was meant for you.
I think what you're saying is a really interesting point. And we just recorded recently an episode on intersex identities.
Yeah, I saw that.
Where people are trying to, they want to categorize intersex people to fit in these like two categories, you know what I mean? To fit in
binary.
Like, the binary. If you get all of these surgeries, suddenly now you meet the standards to be a female. But if someone is transitioning and like you're saying, they meet the standards, still people want to say that no, you're not.
Actually, I know what your bones look like. Yeah. So denied.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a very interesting point. Did you have anything that you wanted to add in terms of like what makes you feel so connected to the lesbian community and identity overall?
For sure. I think I've had a similar journey to you in a lot of ways of like, yeah, I'm a fucking lesbian. Like I'm in it. I'm loving it. And, you know, and then I got the nose piercings and then I was like, bisexuality.
Oh, it's the nose piercing.
It's the nose piercing. Like the carabiner, the nose piercings.
Right. So once you get the carabiner, you're like, I'm a lesbian through and through. Once you get the nose pierced, you're like, you know what?
Yeah.
So
you're talking
3 men are okay, and every woman ever. You know?
So accessories do matter.
I think there is an accessory component to it for sure. You know, it's like communicating to the world. I think so much of labels is, at least for me, like not about putting myself in a box, but a way of communicating with others what my interests are, where I stand, without having to like, you know, be like, so what do you do on the weekends?
So when I was 17, I decided to get a facial piercing. So context, this is 2005, 2004.
Where'd you put it? Wait, was it this?
Yeah, you got it.
Okay.
That's right. Yeah. You know, I'm seeing the Lorettes making a comeback. But at the time, I was telling my friends, you know, I went to a small Catholic school in the North Shore. You know, I really want to be more visibly a dyke, visibly a lesbian.
Catholic schools.
Yeah, and you want to signal that I'm a lesbian.
Yeah.
And I think I'm gonna get this labret piercing. And so I had it for 6 months. It only lasted so long, but
Did it work?
You know what? It didn't really do anything. I will
Lesbianism
say.
rejected.
Yeah.
But again, this was 2005, a very different time when I was choosing my accessories for this episode.
Yeah.
I put on my puka shell necklace. I thought it was a little too much, a little snug, but I'm like, okay, puka shell necklace. We're like bringing it back.
Puka shell choker.
Yeah. It was a straight up puka shell choker, like really bringing it back
love
to
that.
flagging queer in Y2K.
I feel like it also gives like Disney Channel for sure. The puka shells.
Oh yeah, and
Oh,
I think for
yeah.
me as
Yeah.
an island person,
Yeah.
it's also culturally relevant.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What were both of your experiences like growing up? Like when you look back now, were there signs that you were both a lesbian and trans/non-binary? And how do you like shifting through those experiences now?
I've always been masculine. My essence has always been very masculine from my early memories.
Like what?
Oh my God.
I'm just
In
kidding.
deportment,
2005, there was the
mannerisms.
Yeah.
I'm born in 1988. So in my early memories in the early 90s, I just remember being just so masculine.
You were born in 1988?
Yes.
Congratulations on your skin.
Thank you.
Hold on.
Oh,
I thought you
I
were my
appreciate
age
that.
or
Yeah.
younger.
Oh,
Like,
no.
what are we saying?
Turning 37.
Oh my God.
Been around a while.
I brought the older generation today.
yeah,
I'm doing
but,
public service.
The island skin.
Back to the question. I've always been very masculine, not necessarily in a sporty, tomboy way, but just in deportment and tastes and preferences in mannerisms, going to school and being told that I'm not feminine enough or kind of being outside of girlhood in that way growing up.
Especially in Catholic school. You better girl up.
Yeah, in Catholic school in a Filipino Catholic community.
Did you get crushes when you were little?
Definitely got crushes.
Did you identify that they were crushes, or did you not really know that they were crushes until much later?
I knew they were crushes.
Interesting, because like I got many crushes when I was little, but I didn't know what they were because I was like, you must like boys because that's what people do
what you're
when
supposed to
they're.
do.
Well, that's what you're supposed to do when you are seen as a girl and identify as a girl. But I would always have like this feeling of, oh, I really want to be her best friend so bad, and I just want to like make sure that she's okay and like take care of her a little bit. But I didn't know that it was a crush until in my young adulthood when I was like realizing that I am gay, and then I look back and I'm like, oh, that makes sense.
That's so real. I'm not gay. I just want to write a 10-hour symphony for her every day, every morning, and play it to her every night.
That's friendship, right?
Yeah, no, that's what best friends do.
Friendship.
Yeah.
And they were roommates.
Besties.
I knew, it was a different level. And when I look back at my journals from kindergarten and grade 1, I can really see where-
Kindergarten.
Yeah, from
You
kindergarten.
kept-
I kept
Wow.
everything.
You kept journals.
Oh
in
yeah,
kindergarten?
yeah.
Elite. You were advanced.
And I can really see how I saw my gender expression
Wow.
and my desire through those journal entries. So I definitely had one about Katie Lang, for example.
Shout out Katie Lang.
And a photo of me, like a self-portrait of me in a suit
Oh my god.
with short hair.
Wow.
And then me
This is a
with
sophisticated
my
kindergarten.
crush. Yeah, me hanging out at Chuck E. Cheese with my crush. That was definitely a
You
journal
were a
entry.
romantic.
Definitely.
That's so
and
cute.
that really continued to,
Yeah.
it evolved, for me as a musician and a songwriter. I just
Makes
would
sense.
write songs about my desire for my sapphic desires.
Wow.
Yeah, and up until now, hasn't changed.
Every time we interview people and they tell me about like how sophisticated their reflections were at such a young age, I was like, I needed to be in the special education room and that's why I was there. I was like, wow, I can barely read.
The yearning.
Yeah.
Yearning at such a young
Yearning.
age.
And thankfully, my family couldn't do anything about my masculinity. They just had to learn to accept it. Fast forward to being a teenager in grade 9.
Yeah.
Hormones, right? Grade 8, grade 9, we're discovering our sexuality, wanting to connect with people. I would borrow lesbian books from the library, including lesbian erotica.
Wow.
So my mom straight up caught me with my erotica.
I love this.
And she was so.
think she loved it.
I thank her for this. She told me, I really want to support your writing and your art. Just be careful. Like, this is fiction, but ultimately, I know you're just discovering like who you are. So I'm just
really cool.
not verbatim, but
yeah.
that was the essence of it, and I'm just so grateful for that. So thank you,
What
Mom.
age was this
your
again?
mom's pretty
14.
Wow. That is really nice.
That's really nice.
And was your mom a first generation immigrant here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, from the Philippines.
That's really awesome.
Did you ever try the whole straight thing, or were you just like
Day one. Came out with slacks.
I did like boys. Like I had crushes on boys, but I always felt this awkwardness because I was masculine. But for the most part, I've mostly been into sapphic leaning.
Seeing yourself as a masculine person and not seeing two masculine people together. So it's like not being able to imagine like a mass for mass relationship per se. Was that kind of the challenge?
Yeah, I think that's a great
Yeah.
way to talk about representation, because for me growing up, I didn't really see queer couples until I was maybe 16 in this concert band called Rainbow Concert Band. They're Canada's first and maybe only concert queer trans concert band. And that was the first time I actually met elders and queers who were in relationships. And, I saw femme for femme couples, mask for mask couples. But prior to that, it was just media representation.
Yeah.
I don't know if necessarily
much.
L Word or Queer as Folk was the best representation. Yeah. But one movie that does stand out for me is Better Than Chocolate, which is a lesbian movie. And they did have a couple, like a butch lesbian and a feminine trans woman who got together at the end. I remember like how powerful that movie was for me to see that couple specifically.
This podcast is proudly sponsored by Vizzy Hard Seltzer.
Over the last 5 years, Vizzy has supported our mission to authentically and positively represent the entire LGBTQ2S+ community.
And with Vizzy's vibrant flavors, you can follow your own vibe. Be bold, be flavorful, and above all else, be yourself. Plus, Vizzy only has 100 calories and 1 gram of sugar per can.
Cheers! Must be of legal drinking age, and please enjoy responsibly.
And now, back to the episode.
Figuring out that you're non-binary along the way, like I know you said you felt very like masculine, but when did non-binary like kind of come into play for you?
Yeah, I'd say non-binary is really recent for me. When I came out, non-binary identity wasn't really an open thing. I was just mostly going to lesbian events. Events called her, she, literally called her, she, like the two pronouns together. And very specifically.
Like Hershey chocolate.
Like Hershey, but without the Y. It was 2008. I met my first non-binary person, and that felt really radical for me because I hadn't met anyone like that. I'd met trans people, but not someone who was identified as non-binary, genderqueer. It was when I moved to Toronto 10 years ago that I started to explore my gender more, binding, cutting the hair, a specific masculine expression. I think that was very timely of 2014, 2015. The button up and the taper fade.
We know it well.
Yeah, I don't think I wore the
Hall
bow
of Famers
tie
in this room.
I've had top surgery and I've done hormone therapy and masculinized to a point that felt comfortable for me. And I would say the non-binary label, I think, encompasses my gender expression the most.
J. Marie, how did you discover yourself?
I'd say my journey was pretty, dare I say, unique, especially growing up in a like post-colonial nation of Trinidad and Tobago, where there's a lot of expectations of performance, and as a culture it's relatively homogenous. Everyone's like, we go carnival, we party, we drink, we lime, rinse and repeat. And don't get me wrong, I like 2 out of 3 of those things, 2 out of 4. But, if you don't really adhere to those standards, even as a perceived heterosexual cisgender person, you still aren't really included. Back to like my own journey, I think a lot of it was actually like hiding my femininity a lot growing up, because I just saw the way both in media as well as my peers were treated for expressing feminine interests when being perceived and being raised as boys. My 2 favorite movies growing up were like Little Mermaid and Lion King. I think Lion King really helped keep the plausible deniability of being a boy, of being perceived as a boy, because it's like, I just can't wait to be king, personally. But I think Little Mermaid was like the thing for me. Like I loved her. I mean, look at the hair. The entire narrative of The Little Mermaid was written by queer person to express their inability to exist within the normative spaces.
Was it actually written by a queer person?
Yes, it was in the 1800s, believe it or not. Yeah.
Interesting.
Don't quote me on that.
Fact.
We're gonna do some research on that
It
one.
might be a fake fact.
Yeah, it might be a fake fact, but we're gonna fact check right here, and it'll be like Jamie Revere was right, but she was kind of off the mark. Yeah. But I just found it as well personally as a very strong allegory of just like, you know, to see how the people live and want to be part of that, and then to not really have that access for yourself, I think is a big overarching theme of my early childhood. You know, there is the compulsory heteronormativity element of like, well, you're supposed to like girls. And I was like, well, good thing I do. Because I did
I'm
feel that.
doing one part, right?
I'm doing it just right. Yeah. But I never really felt like, you know, I never wanted big arms. I never wanted to be hairy. You know, like all these things felt wrong for me. But I still felt connected to the attraction to women, right? Yeah. But then on top of that, my attraction to women was very much framed within like a queer context. Like I wasn't attracted to like the girl who everyone else was necessarily attracted to. I didn't really have celebrity crushes in the same way. Because first of all, I was 12. Why am I attracted to a 30-year-old woman? That's weird, personally. But definitely had an odd time navigating that, as well as like coming into myself. I think from a relatively young age, there were signs, you know, you ask anyone after the fact and like, yeah, you know, that makes sense. It makes sense why you were always playing girl in house, you know, after the fact. But no one ever pushed me, and I wasn't really like bullied or ostracized. Fortunately, I went to a relatively small school in Trinidad, and, you know, I just kept to myself, did my own thing, got good grades, and got the hell out of there. And that's what I always tell my youth at my group. Just get the hell out of there. Yeah. Just get the grades, get out of there. Yeah. You're better for it. Nothing good is in there. But yeah, I guess that's a bit of a short, like, anecdotal tale of my own journey through identity. I think a lot of it was kind of like not being no one. I think I still brought my personality. I was always a bit of a class clown, you know. My mom from a young age told me I was annoying, and I was like, that's great. I'm definitely not going to build a complex on this one. But, you know, trying to not bring attention to my feminine qualities by, you know, being funny, by being interesting, by being charismatic, you know, like that was a lot of what I brought to the table so as to shield myself from my true spirit. So it wasn't until like I was like 22 when I did it, like finally come out that I was like, okay, yeah, no, this is who I am. This is what I'm doing. Like, fuck what you heard. And if you can't get with it, get out. I definitely have a bit of like a indignant relationship to my transness, which is just like, if you can't hold me, I don't want you to be part of my life. Maybe scorched earth is not necessarily the best solution all the time, but it's definitely something that I've used to protect myself. And I think a big theme of my discovery of identity is like safeguarding my softness, my kindness, because, well, one, as trans people, as trans women, we are often put to many double standards with ourselves. You know, it's like, you're reinforcing the gender binary. You're not doing it right. You can't do either thing. It's like, right. So I can't be feminine. Otherwise, I'm just perpetuating what women are supposed to be like. And I can't not be feminine. Otherwise, you're just going to misgender me. Yeah. So where is it for me? And I think pushing through that is just like, well, what do you want? If everyone's mad at you, what do you actually want? Right. And I think that's kind of where I really like shot my arrow towards. It's like, well, everyone else can figure it out or get out of the way.
Have you made an effort to try and like soften it at all? Or like, do you see areas where keeping the wall up is like a hindrance to you, maybe like emotionally or like connecting with others?
I think so. I definitely, I think a big like barrier in the first place is just not going to a lot of things sometimes, because it's like, yeah, some people I know are going this, but I don't know. I don't really see myself here. Or, well, one, I definitely get overstimulated rather quickly. Loud music is, you know, fun until it's not. I'm trying to bring parts of myself that are still authentic, but also protecting myself. I've definitely been hurt more times than I care to, but it is definitely that balance. And I think trying to be honest with my softness has brought in a lot of joy and connection to my life. But I also think that, you know, something my therapist told me a while ago is like, you know, non-violence without some kind of protection is just opening yourself up to slaughter. You can't just be the bleeding heart all the time. You know when it is time to share that vulnerability. I can't just be open for the world. Yeah. Otherwise, I'm just pouring from an empty cup. Like, I'm 10 years in now to the trans thing. Like, I've been doing it for a decade.
That whole trans
thing. But there's definitely parts where there were spaces that I existed in where like my femininity wasn't praised, you know, and my androgyny was praised. And then I was kind of, no one forced me to like become more non-binary, dare I say, but it was definitely kind of like a thing that was passively encouraged, you know, kind of, oh, you're this like thing that like we get to be in proximity to, and that makes us feel better about ourselves. And it was all great until like, you know, I started masculizing again because I wasn't taking my hormones properly, and then people were misgendering me more, and I was being mistreated, and I was almost being treated almost as more prone to violence because I was being perceived more masculine. Right. And I was like, we got to pump the brakes. This is fucked up. I don't like this. And it's not like they were fucked up. I mean, there's some things that they could be better at, but ultimately it was my own journey of not being strong enough to take pride in my femininity and like really own that.
Is they just people who are close to you?
At the time, yes.
Yeah.
I think it's easy to kind of generalize like, oh, it's all of them. It's every single person who's not like fucking with me.
Yeah.
But it also takes like, humility to be honest about the fact that it's like, well, I'm also putting myself in this position. I'm also like opening myself up to this kind of feedback, like when that should be a boundary for myself. It's like, hey, you don't get to tell me that.
It's a personal journey as well, like figuring out your own self-discovery and
your own boundaries.
Yeah, other people can help you through it and help guide you through it, but I think you can get lost when other people's input becomes louder than your own.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Well, I think too is just like, being the only trans person in the room, being the only trans femme in the room. And it's like, wait a second, why am I being ostracized and villainized? It's been a lot of taking stock of like what I could have done better, what I didn't deserve, and what I do deserve. Moving forward with like the intention that like I can't change the past, but I can learn from it and do better.
Yeah.
And that both includes engaging with people, but also honoring myself.
As somebody who identifies as non-binary, if you're moving yourself away from the gender binary, I am wondering, why does it still feel good for you to identify with lesbians in a community that has a strong connotation with specifically women loving women?
So I really appreciated this question. And before I dive into that, I just want to say for me, as a masculine of center person, I don't experience trans misogyny. So I feel my ability to embrace masculinity and femininity is very different than most trans feminine people, trans women. When it comes to, I guess, the idea of removing myself from a binary, I would say I'm removing the barrier between the binaries. I've been able to balance both my masculine and feminine sides. I'm working on the feminine side, as we discussed before we started taping. I see that as separate as me loving women and being sapphic leaning and wanting to date women and being drawn to that desire and desiring that sexually and relationally.
I like that about like blurring the lines between the binary. I definitely resonate with that as like a non-binary person as well. As like it does feel like I embody both. I think for me, in some ways, I still identify, for example, like politically as a woman. You know what I mean? That's kind of like a hard thing to explain. While like I don't want to be perceived as a woman, no matter what though, I feel politically connected to feminism and to like women's issues. You know what I'm saying? And like the history of that. So it's kind of challenging to just remove yourself from the binary. I don't think society will automatically remove you all of the time.
That makes sense. And for me, because I've always been really masculine, I feel my experiences with misogyny have been really different. I don't know what it's like to be catcalled.
Yeah.
As an example.
Oh, I do.
I did it on her way up the stairs. So yeah.
I heard a whistle and I was like,
yeah. What the hell?
Summer construction is happening.
yeah.
No, but what is your experience with misogyny then?
In my bio, we mentioned that I'm an Army veteran. I think my times in the military there have been clear examples of how misogyny looks different for me than my more feminine counterparts. Right. So I can both be the bro, standing shoulder to shoulder with like the cis men, making comments about women, but at the same time being a racialized, an Asian women in the military being exoticized at the same time and having certain stereotypes and assumptions made. So that's one example of like how I've experienced misogyny.
In terms of specifically being like, as you said, an Asian woman in the Army, were there certain like fetishizations? I have such a hard time pronouncing that word. Fetishizations put onto you about what that means.
I think the assumption that I won't express my true feelings or talk back or challenge or assumptions that culturally I'm more, say for example, more family oriented, more docile, more nurturing, or even submissive sexually.
Yeah, and like
which is kind of true in a way, but in some cases, but
that's not their
none of your
yeah.
business.
But it would be really interesting because one deployment that I went on, I was the only Asian woman in a unit of 500 people, and I like worked this warehouse where we would have all of the troops come in and like drop off stuff, and I just felt like every day it was just getting hit on all the time.
Really?
And when on deployment, you get to take a vacation in the middle of it, and often people would go to Thailand, and it would be really interesting when they would come back, and I feel, I just felt like I was hit on all the time. Like, we get a lot of like creepy behavior, people asking me what I was up to, if I wanted to hang out. So it was just a weird experience because, on a deployment, it's mostly men. I had to be on guard all the time, and really hold back that like friendly part of me because like I just couldn't trust some of the men around me.
That's fair. I mean, the military was a huge way that Asian fetishization was spread. You know what I mean? Like through military bases and like was it sexual tourism, or what would they call it when it's like specifically like bringing women into military bases for men? I can't remember the exact term.
Mm-hmm. I know what you're talking about, though.
And we hear so many stories just about how horrible of an environment it is for women in general, just like the military. So yeah,
always.
I can understand that you definitely would be very on guard with people, even being masculine presenting. When people hit on me and I'm like dressed really masculine, I'm like, not people, when cis men hit on me and I'm dressed really masculine, I'm like, I think that says something gay about you.
When anybody hits on me, I'm like, you're gay. Could be a cis man, cis woman, gay, like anybody.
It's like a
You're
still
gay.
from Tumblr that's from 2014. It's like, am I a boy? Am I a girl? Doesn't matter. Everyone that likes me is gay.
Yeah, you must be.
True.
You gotta
To
be
like
a little
me,
zesty.
you gotta
Something's
be
going
gay.
on there. Yeah.
Actually, as I go through my body count, I would say majority of the cis men I've hooked up with have been queer and bisexual.
Exactly. Oh, I understand.
You understand.
Yes. Going back to the understanding of lesbianism towards it being kind of a gender non-conforming label, I do have some research that I would like to share about
the lesbian scholarship.
The complex history of lesbian identities. So lesbians have always had a complex relationship to gender and womanhood, and lesbian history is deeply rooted in gender nonconformity, predating modern language around non-binary identities. I would first like to reference self-identified radical lesbian Monique Whitting when she said lesbians are not women. In her work, The Straight Mind, what she means by this is that quote-unquote women is not just a biological fact, but a social role, one that is created and upheld in relation to men. In our society, to be quote-unquote a woman is often defined by serving a role within heterosexual structures, being desired by men, subordinate to men, defined in contrast to men. So when she said lesbians are not women, she's saying lesbians reject that role. They are not defined in relation to men, and therefore they step outside of what society recognizes as a woman.
See, I relate to that because I don't think that I am a woman by society standards, but I still identify as a woman. For my own personal reasons, it's because I want to redefine what a woman is, what it can look like, what it can be. But if we're strictly talking about what some people or part of society holds as like the vision of a woman, then I am not that. I understand her definition and I agree with it, actually. But at the same time, I'm like, why don't I take your term and I fuck you up with it by redefining what that means and still identifying with it?
100%. I think going down this road of like what is a woman by society standards, this is actually what made me want to identify as non-binary. I'm like, oh, I'm definitely not that. But I think a lot of people can have your reaction too of reject your definition, but I'm going to make my own definition and continue to identify as a woman, you know?
For sure. This quote also makes me think of Simone de Beauvoir's quote of one is not born a woman, but becomes one, which is to say that womanhood is not necessarily just about physiology. It's about a social set of expectations that are assumed. Caregiving, child rearing, relationality, gossip, tending to chores. In a colonial kind of industrial context, really frames as like subservient to another, which is the man. All this stuff, especially with like non-binary identity, it also makes me think of Deleuze and Guattari. Can't remember which novel it is, but really important foundational stuff about transsexuality and identity and becoming, which is to say that like chasm between male and female is actually not that great. Intersex people actually define the narrowness of that gender divide, and transsexual people actually prove non-binary identity exists through the act of transitioning. You go through the uncanny valley of gender expression and identity to then become a version of yourself that is more true to your spirit, because you actually go through that. Like, you have an experience that is still of, at least in my context, of womanhood, but is informed by a different set of context from the start, from your birth.
You show that it's possible to live outside of
Exactly.
the binary.
So much of gender expression and presentation and misogyny, transphobia is actually about policing bodies, and it's about shutting down expectations. For me, transitioning, for me, queerness, for me, lesbianism is not about putting myself in a box. It's about being able to be like how I see fit and being able to communicate what that looks like,
Yeah.
And for me, like, I don't really experience like day-to-day transmisogyny. I just experience misogyny.
Yeah.
I get catcalled. I get told to go to the women's washroom. You know what I mean? I get pointed this way. I get the ma'ams. I get the misses, which is to say that so much of gender policing is actually about stifling non-normative expression. Like, I don't get questioned about going to the bathroom, but many of my non-binary peers do. Many of my more masculine friends who still identify as women and or use the women's restroom experience that, as opposed to me. I'm like, just gonna eat my fries. I'm just gonna go to the bathroom. See you later.
I think it's funny when we try to categorize things and, like you said, put them in a box, because the box, when you first ask somebody who's maybe perhaps very traditional, very conservative in their values, etc., will give you the definition of what that box is. For example, you ask them, what is a woman? They say, it's these chromosomes and you look like this.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, well, I have these chromosomes and I look like this though. So then what does that box mean now? And they're like, okay, well, maybe we can expand the box so that whatever. However, when we put and say an intersex woman in there, now it's like, okay, I don't even have the chromosomes that you're talking about. So then that pushes the box even further. And then we keep adding people to put in this box so much that the box expands, and then it's like no longer a box.
There's no way to define womanhood while excluding trans women that is coherent. Ultimately, it's like, oh, well, birth. Well, there's many cis women who don't give childbirth. Oh, these chromosomes. Well, there's many people with these chromosomes who don't have genealogical expression because of certain blockages. Oh, it's this ineffable essence. Okay, well, if we're getting there, then I think we're not really defining anything.
We lost the point. We come
It's
full
like,
circle.
what are you talking about? Do you know what you're talking about? And usually they don't. They can name anything, and we can discount it and disprove it by the existence of other people. They get so stumped that they're like, you know what? It's what I think it is.
Exactly. Yeah. It doesn't really hold weight beyond being populist kind of sensationalism.
Oh, I like that. Populist sensationalism.
Pierre Polyev, eat your heart out.
Yeah,
So to further this point, we're going to dive into queer phenomenology.
It's a feminine
First, does anyone know what the term phenomenology means?
Isn't that like what Lady Gaga does every night on stage?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a philosophical study of how we experience things, not what things are in themselves, but how they appear to us through our senses, feelings, and perceptions. You can say it like this. When you see a chair, phenomenology isn't interested in the scientific or objective definition of a chair. It's interested in how you experience the chair, how it feels to sit on it, what memories it brings up, the way the body relates to it in space, this kind of thing.
If you feel it's a chair, then it's a chair.
This is a chair.
I more mean it's like the experience of sitting on this chair. So it's like, wow, this chair's kind of soft and like just the overall experience of the chair.
These like Plato's tables, where it's like the first table is the physical existence of the table, the second table is like the concept of the table or something.
It's like a silly academic thing. But okay, why it might be important.
Wait, is it like the weather outside? When it's
it feels.
It's 10 degrees, but it feels 0. It just feels.
Kind of. We're getting there. So why is it important? This might also explain it a little bit more because I give another example. So it reminds us that our experiences are shaped by our position in the world. So the way a person of color may experience walking down a certain street could be different than a white person's experience walking down that same street. It dives into our different intersectional experiences of the world,
Okay, I think I get it.
Yeah.
Phenomenology. It is the understanding of phenomenons that occur to certain and specific instances and the study of that.
There you go. Sarah Ahmed specifically wrote a paper called Queer Phenomenology, where she tried to bring the practice of phenomenology and queer studies together. She asked, how does it feel to not fit into the world you're in, and what happens when you're out of line with gender and sexual expectations, and kind of like dove into like what that experience would feel like.
It just feels.
If it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck. Could be a table.
Does it feel like a duck?
Like a duck. So that was a long way of explaining this small quote that I'm going to give you. Hopefully it was worth all of that. A lesbian orientation might involve a different direction, one that does not follow the lines of compulsory heterosexuality. The lesbian is not directed towards men. She may not even be directed towards the kinds of social forms that are structured around heterosexual desire. She might even be disoriented by the scripts of femininity. Not being directed towards men, like a lesbian doesn't just avoid men romantically, they may also like move away from the entire system built around straight relationships, i.e. marriage, nuclear families, etc. And disoriented by the scripts of femininity. Well, like scripts of femininity are society's spoken and unspoken rules about how women should and are supposed to look, act, dress, and feel, usually all designed to make them more appealing towards men. Mm-hmm. However,
this
kind
is
of like
where lesbianism intersects with queerness, I feel.
You think?
I feel.
I think your feeling might be onto something.
Yeah.
So I think that gay men's experience, although many do identify as queer, can be seen as very different from lesbians' experience because of the intersectionality of the world is built for men, and we don't experience that privilege. And anything underneath the tippy top, which is men, but especially cis white men, becomes then oppressive groups and minority groups, and we sort of lean more towards queerness. Am I making sense, or am I going crazy?
Well, kind of where you took me there is, I think it's interesting because, yes, the whole world is meant to be oriented towards men, and specifically lesbians are disoriented. They're like looking in a different direction with it,
I'm
right?
very disoriented.
Using her words, you're disoriented from it. But gay men, and honestly, I think people talk about how like a lot of straight men are really, they're looking for the approval of other men a lot of the time. Yes. And a lot of people are like, do you even like women? Like, you kind of seem like you hate them. And just the way that our society is built. So it's like, even like the way that they want to like build up their muscles and their physiques and everything is like they are looking for the approval of other men a lot of the time.
For my bros to tell me I'm hot.
Being a gay man, it's like it kind of actually like fits within patriarchy and within our current system. It actually sometimes reaffirms it a little bit.
Men are never being the homoeroticism allegations.
Never.
That's for sure.
No.
Which doesn't preclude them from being homosexual. Homoeroticism is notably different and is the fetishization, praise, and pedestaling of men, you know? Like you ask the average guy on the street who they look up to, chances are they're not going to say a woman. Like so often men do not value women as peers. They don't see them as people to look up to. They don't see them as people they respect. Maybe they'll say their mom. Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe an aunt who really like, you know, was very butch and like really gave it to them.
Yeah. Or if they had a single mom that like took on all of these roles and
But
responsibilities.
even then, that's a pedestaling of womanhood as opposed to seeing them as peers. Right?
There are gay men out there who perpetuate misogyny and are misogynistic.
Yeah. I've been to Woody's.
Yeah. And also
we just did a gay men episode and there was so much Woody slander. It's hilarious that you just brought that up.
I don't know how long ago this came up, but maybe it's specific to like Grindr or
that
etiquette,
old app.
like etiquette on apps where the idea of no femmes, no fats, no Asians.
Yep.
And I feel a lot of that, you know, there's racism and there's also sexism, misogyny all at play because there is this, I guess, femphobia or this dislike of the feminine that's pervades that mentality. I feel like in some gay spaces, femininity or like feminist is just not wanted.
This is also something that is pervasive in even cis women's spaces, notably cis white women's spaces. I've frequented spaces where all the girls, they're straight, they got boyfriends or this or that, maybe even some of them are gay, but they wear like the cargo shorts, or they wear like the long jean, the Levi's capris, what I'm talking about, and like a button shirt. I'm sorry.
What shoes?
But it's like
What accessories?
What are the shoes? Functionally, they're dressing
Not
like
a puka
men.
necklace.
Puka choker?
Yeah.
But functionally, they do dress like men, which is to say that they still benefit from the privileges of being perceived as cis women, but they functionally, socially engage with each other and praise each other in masculine ways. They're like, yeah, man, this is my bro. Me and the boys, we're just taking a drink tonight. It's all women, which is fine. The irony or the hypocrisy comes when a trans woman or even someone who enjoys being feminine comes into space, like, well, I really like having my nails done. And they're like, how dare you come into our space and say you like being feminine?
Are we talking about other lesbians, or are we talking
I'm
about
talking
kind of
about
like
just women in
straight
general.
people?
I think it's something that can not necessarily be insidious, but can be pervasive. It's the same way where, like, I'm not an equalist, I'm a feminist because it's femininity that is looked down upon in this society, right?
Yeah.
It's even exists in internalized misogyny with other women. It's not all women by any means perpetuate misogyny, but we can't just look at the men as the perpetuators of this culture, right? Like, we all have a part to play in furthering it, dismantling it, re-educating ourselves. And to further that point, I think I've noticed a lot where folks feel disillusioned, similar to that quote that you mentioned of like disillusionment with womanhood, and then pick up the non-binary identity, which is really beautiful to see, but then are also removed from like the material kind of realities that other non-binary people go through, while also then taking up that space as a non-binary person, taking up equity seeking positions while you still go home and your parents she her you and you don't protest, which is to say that's your own journey and you have to navigate that. But I think that there also needs to be a level of self-awareness towards like everyone's journey is their own, and I think everyone should take a moment to be like, am I this, or am I just what society tells me I am? Being TME versus TMA, something you alluded to, which is trans misogyny exempt versus trans misogyny affected. When you are perceived as trans femme, when you are perceived as something that is not a cis woman, you are othered, and you have a very different experience in spaces, in medical situations, in social settings, that while we can still have that same identity, whether it's lesbian, whether it's non-binary, whether it's trans, are notably different because of our intersections.
What I've been sitting on and listening to the discussion so far is the tension I feel between, a Western definition of womanhood in relation to patriarchy. Yeah. The other side of it is my cultural upbringing that I would say is to the core matriarchal, but then because of colonization and U.S. and most recently U.S. imperialism has adopted patriarchy. Yeah. But it's interesting to witness that tension within, say, my own family or community, where we recognize the important roles that women play, and acknowledging gender fluidity and the roles of say like the Babaylan, who are trans, non-binary people who were spiritual leaders, for example.
Is that like a Filipino kind of equivalent to like a two-spirit?
Yeah, it could be, similar, very similar. Yeah. Because I grew up here, I'm holding both like a Western European understanding of gender, lesbianism, plus my understanding of femininity, masculinity in the Philippines.
Absolutely. And are you actively working on trying to like decolonize your understanding of gender and everything?
Yeah, always. But just recognizing that we're in a contemporary form. Like I can't be like, okay, everything's before the Spanish colonization and after, or before U.S. imperialism or after. It's dynamic. It's constantly moving and evolving.
Because it does get complicated when then you try to fit yourself into other labels, and I think that's when everyone in the community starts infighting, when we're like, labels have to have meaning and we're working off of old definitions around gender identity or colonial ideas of gender. And then the work of trying to decolonize your mind around gender starts to get really complicated when you want to exist within community still that is still working on like colonial frameworks. You know what I mean?
I think it's suffice to say there's levels to this. I think that's what I'm alluding to too, as well, is that it's not to say that we don't all experience some form of oppression, but we also experience some forms of privilege. We all have our own unique way of navigating that. Like we can look at the overarching themes of this is more likely to happen for these types of people in this, but I think we all have a responsibility to like own up to the ways in which we are benefiting from systems and also perpetuating them, but then also are disadvantaged by it. And I think it's easy in the current zeitgeist to kind of be like, well, I'm just the victim to this whole thing above us, because the issue is these are all bigger than any of us. Like how do you dismantle the garbage industrial complex, let alone like the prison industrial complex, you know? Like how do we change these things that have existed before us, it will exist after us, but also can transform through us, you know?
Total
Nuance
wipeout.
and levels.
Yeah.
Total wipeout. That's what we got to do,
Yeah.
man. Just total wipeout.
Ultimately,
Stop paying taxes, dismantle it,
Take me out.
kneecap the whole system, bring the zombies, we're ready.
ultimately, we just want to be able to express and relate in ways that are authentic to us without that cognitive dissonance of like, this is how I'm presenting, this is how I'm being perceived and should be, and this is actually what I desire and really want.
If you're watching this episode and you're thinking open relationships do sound like the thing for me, but I just don't know where to start, where do I go? How do I meet people? Where do I put my hands? I know exactly where you should put your hands, and it's on the dating app Field. That's actually where the two of us started exploring when we just opened up our relationship.
The dating landscape is riddled with alienating behaviors like mindless swiping and ghosting. It may seem inconceivable that anything else out there exists, but it does. You have options. Field, the dating app for the curious, is a space where open-minded people come to playfully explore each other and themselves. In the same way that entering a different room can bring out a different side of yourself, stepping onto Field may reveal new parts of yourself that you haven't met before. There's breathing room to explore your desires. Think relationship anarchy, cuddling, being a brat. And find communities that share your interests. Think D&D, tennis, zine making. Free from ads and completely independent, this is the space that draws curious, playful, open-minded people such as yourself. In connecting more deeply to yourself, it's possible to find your people and build a community that you've been looking for. Here's a little preview of what life is like on Field.
I used to think I was too femme to be dominant, too feminine to be anything but a woman, and too boxed in by labels that I never chose. But then I got on Field. Exploring ethical non-monogamy and kink there cracked something open in me, and I started playing with dominance and stepping into a side of myself that I'd always kept at an arm's length. By the end of the year, my gender and sexuality had shifted in ways I never saw coming, and I'm not the only one. 62% of Field members evolve their desires, identities, and interests within their first year on the app. When you're in a space with no expectations, no boxes to squeeze into, you get to see what's actually yours.
So get out your phone right now, go to the App Store or Google Play and download Field. That's spelled F-E-E-L-D. Thank you, Field, for sponsoring this episode.
Beyond what lesbian academics think, the reality is some masculine and butch lesbians historically passed as men or lived as men to survive and be in partnership with a femme safely, which raises a nuanced conversation today about gender identity versus survival strategy. Like how much of that was just a survival strategy to be with someone that you love, or how much of that was them actually expressing gender identity before they had the language for it. Historic lesbians throughout the 19th and 20th century often defied expected gender roles. Many dressed masculinely, worked in male-dominated jobs, rejected traditional femininity. Perhaps it wasn't always a conscious gender statement, but as part of carving out space for their autonomy in relationships with women. We found out about these now famous lesbians, such as Anne Lister, through their historic diaries. And
did she keep diaries from kindergarten also?
I don't know if they were as advanced.
As advanced.
But that is a common lesbian trope, actually. So you're living up to the stereotypes.
From
yeah.
Oh, I'm illiterate, so.
That's aligning with
Same.
history. Yeah.
We're here together.
Yeah. One day they're going to like dust up your old kindergarten diaries.
Oh my gosh, I hope so. That would be, it'd be in a museum somewhere or a
Add it to
community
the queer
archive.
archives.
I know, I keep tagging Katie Lang and things, just hoping she will.
Caitlin, if you're seeing
her
this, we
marketing
love
team
you.
will finally reach out and we get to do a masculine duet together.
The craving is constant. In fact,
Yeah, always
lesbianism is
constant.
about yearning.
Save me, Katie Lang.
It's
Save me.
entirely about yearning.
Only.
99% is yearn. If you
It's
yearn,
true.
you might just be a lesbian.
Lesbian author and archivist Joan Nessel believed butch femme identity was both survival and gender resistance at the same time. So in the Lesbian Herstory archives that she co-founded and compiled, I found this quote: "In the old bar days, it was dangerous to be a visible lesbian, but it was also exhilarating. In our very existence, our clothes, our gestures, our ways of loving, we challenged gender roles. We had no choice but to live outside of them. We lived our gender rebellions in public spaces. We played with gender, made it up, turned it on its head, and made love with it. This was our lesbian sexual revolution.
I mean, given the history at the time, when homosexuality was criminalized, what do you do?
I mean, I think we see that it is part of gender identity, though, when we look at like the historic nature of femme identity too. I mean, the option was there to be a femme presenting lesbian. Perhaps it was the fact that they were in relation to butches that made it passable as like a straight dynamic, and therefore the femme could exist in their queerness because the butch existed. But in order to exist as a very butch or mass presenting person, I think that has to feel aligned with you on some levels as part of your gender identity and part of your expression as well. For me, when I was trying to do that when I first came out of the closet, it was like it just didn't feel authentic or organic to me. Like it didn't feel right. And I don't think that ever could have been something that I did, is just like present as butch, that it wasn't me. You know what I mean? And I think that is part of your gender expression.
I think I did that too for myself when I first came out, especially, and up until really just up until last week. No, up until I moved to Toronto, I think I was very butch presenting, I would say. It wasn't just in like the clothing that I was wearing, but also like my mannerisms. My mannerisms were sort of imitating what my perception was of a cis man. I had a lot of praying mantis hands.
I think I've done that a few times in this interview.
You're like, ooh. You never heard of praying mantis?
No, I didn't know it was
the
called
praying
that.
mantis hands and the kind of like yeah.
Unfortunately, it looks natural when I do it because I did it
Practiced religiously. You get a lot of time before you came to Toronto.
It's like riding a bike. You just get back on it, and it just looks natural when you do it. For some people, it looks unnatural. I am gifted. I think that was also in part, not just queer signaling, but it was also in part like internalized femphobia for myself, which I have worked really hard and still am working really hard to sort of dismantle and rid of that. Something that really caught me off guard pretty recently was I was at a party, and for some reason, topping and bottoming came up.
Of course.
Because queer people. And I got asked whether I top or bottom. And I was like, I'm a healthy amount of both. And the one person who was very like, they were older than me and they were very like mass presenting. She was like, you bottom? What? Carbon bottoms? And I was like, why?
Interesting.
Why are you looking at that as if that's like a bad thing or like a weakness quality. Or like less than?
I like getting my shit torn open. Like, get in line, bitch. I am the same. I think.
No. Please be serious.
No, please.
When I started to be more comfortable with being a receptive partner, or a bottom, my sexuality, there was a bit of a cognitive dissonance because I'm so masculine, and I'm supposed to like perform in a certain way. But when I started to be more accepting that I was a verse bottom, it changed. I'm like, I'm just comfortable with myself. I look like this, but this is how I want to make love.
Yeah. And I think that was something I discovered through an exploration of kink, is that we tie so much of our sex lives to the gender binary as well, and that is so limiting and not very satisfactory if it doesn't align with what you actually want.
I think it's that same conversation that we're having about like gender conformity is also tied to the whole top and bottom dichotomy. It was just like, we're just importing heteronormative expectations into the queer community,
100%.
which is fun in like the way that astrology is fun. It's like, well, I'm an Aquarius moon and this and that. I'm not an Aquarius moon. I think a lot of the becoming of the self is trying on labels and seeing what feels good. True. You know what I mean? It's same thing with names, same thing with pronouns. It's like what feels good when you were referred to or seen as this way. Importing that dichotomy into our communities, I think, is a fun way to also kind of understand dynamics, but it's also part of us not doing the work to unlearn those behaviors too, because it's almost like a crutch, a comfort to be like, well, I'm like a top, so I'm looking for more bottom. You know what I mean? Like this or that. When intimacy and love, and notably lesbianism, is about experiencing attraction and intimacy beyond physical means. You know, it's just like sex is a psychosomatic experience. It's like it's beyond what our body is and what our parts are and what shape we are. It's about the spirit, you know, and like connecting with that and really nurturing that in moments, both in intimacy and in public. You know, like the common trope of lesbians just being like the biggest like simps for their wives, you know, is like, you know, really championing your partners in private and in public.
That's so
like
lesbian of you to
truly
say.
loving women.
You're like,
Truly
it's
loving
about the
women.
souls connecting and simping
about
for
my
your significant
14-hour
Can you
symphony.
get more lesbian than that?
Oh, I can. Just you wait. One thing I wanted to just talk about too, with regards to the earlier point, and then we can move forward, is just like safety and presentation. Certain women are expected to perform femininity, otherwise there's danger, and even then there's danger. To be fair, I think women, we're just
Women, danger.
the danger zone.
Yeah.
But like me muting parts of my femininity and playing up more perhaps butch parts of my femininity, or gender expression in my earlier transition, because I just didn't feel like I could wear a dress and not be like called a fucking slur on the street, you know, or something like that. I think I've done a good job getting to a point where I'm like, I'm out here, bitch, and you're gonna like it. I definitely really resonate with the safety and presentation. And one thing I really wanted to touch on was a book by a Caribbean author, Crystal Gizawan, a book called Erotic Cartographies, which is mapping queerness of lesbians in Trinidad. Cool. So it's a lot about like
sick.
where is safe for you to be yourself. I really recommend you read this book. For me, I'm a huge sucker for Caribbean Anglo literature on gender and sexuality. It's a really burgeoning field right now. Yeah. Another peer of mine wrote this book, Defiant Bodies, which is about like queerness in the Anglophone Caribbean. As someone who grew up in the Caribbean, really being able to see kind of the dynamics that played out in my own life, written in literature in such a technical way, really brought me peace in a way that kind of nothing else really could, because it's like, oh, I'm not alone. And feeling this lack of safety and feeling like I have to perform certain ways and feeling like even when I can sneak into the more normative spaces, I'm aggressed because the normative conversations are inherently bigoted. Anyways, on the next one.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's it. Whatever.
Praying mantis hand.
You know, one text that I did read in preparation for this is titled Diasporic Intimacies, Queer, Filipino, and Canadian Imaginaries. So it's an anthology, probably the first Filipino-Canadian anthology documenting queer and trans experiences. And what I really love about it, each text, each piece in that is multimedia. You know, there's narrative storytelling, there's interviews, there's art pieces. And for me, as a Filipinx person, the way that I experience and articulate my queerness is more than just, say, like through an academic framework. We're talking, it's through storytelling, through art, through music.
The representation goes hard over here.
Defiant Bodies, Dr. Nicholas Attai, if you want to look it up. Erotic Cartographies, Crystal Gizawan, both philosophical doctors, amazing, thoughtful people.
Incredible. Thank you both. This next section that we want to dive into is around who gets to be called a lesbian, community inclusion and tension. So the first question that we want to dive into is, what do we think the definition of a lesbian should be?
Should is a strong word.
As the 4 lesbian lawmakers right here, what do I think it should be?
Is it like we get to decide in this moment, or is someone going to burst in the door if we
As
say
soon
it
as you
wrong?
say what it is here,
The Kool-Aid man.
it's going to be written.
Plays at least one sport, has several knickknacks, and maybe has been in a Subaru in the last 6 months.
Leans towards lesbian music canon. You know, if we're in a Canadian context,
Stream Louis Sanchez.
we got the Jan Ardens and other women in song. If you want to dive deeper to like 70s, 60s songwriters, great. It's a vibe. It's almost
it's a
just something that we
vibe.
know,
It's an
that we
aura.
can't really put words to. It's like if we're talking about phenomenology, like we see it, we sense it, we hear it.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna go flash back to some of the lesbian parties I would go to from
The Hershey's one.
the Hershey's from 2006 to 2010. These parties would typically have an electro room and then a hip hop room. And there's like a really big party that happens during Montreal Pride, like Fierté, called Lesbomond. I don't know if it still occurs, but it would be a 2-floor party where the one floor would be EDM, techno, electronic, and then hip hop. Going in between those floors, I would just see such like a wide range of like lesbian expression across race, bodies, even dress. So it's really hard to say like, okay, a lesbian wears this. It's just a general energy.
It's a vibe.
It's a vibe because lesbian can wear Vans or they can wear Jordans.
Yeah.
Depending on the culture you're coming from and your association with like what a lesbian looks like.
They can wear very comfortable New Balances, and it doesn't have to be a street shoe.
So
Maybe they have foot problems.
currently, Merriam-Webster still defines lesbian as a woman who is sexually or romantically attracted to other women. However, Johns Hopkins University defined it as non-men attracted to non-men in an effort to be inclusive of non-binary lesbians. However, this sparked controversy and resulted in them pulling it from their online glossary. There's a lot of...
They were bullied out of it?
Yeah, so one of the arguments around this is that it feels anti-feminist and an erasure of women. Some feel it was one of the last few words that was in no way tied to men and is now being defined only by reference to them. It's mainly like conservative pundits who are saying this, but also like we do get like conservative pundits like J.K. Rowling, Nikki Haley, and others, but we do get a lot of comments of infighting, people saying stuff like this as well, of like not liking the non-men attracted to non-men.
I have something to say about this. Okay. They have a fear of an erasure of women and think that non-men is not specific enough of a definition because of that fear. I think that this fear comes from this sort of fear is kind of reminding me to a similar fear of the whole argument against trans people in gendered bathrooms. And the reason that it's reminding me of that is because there are a lot of women who are afraid that a man will come into the bathroom. If a man really wants to come into the bathroom,
he's going to do it.
He's going to do it, yeah.
he's just going to open
need to wear a
the
dress
door.
to do it.
There's not security there. There's not a
The
lock
police
there.
might even just help him do it.
There's not a secret code there. He can just do it. He's not gonna like walk up to the bathroom. He's thinking like, I'm gonna do some evil stuff today, and then
The
he's
man's
like,
hands.
that's what men do.
This is
and then
what they
he's
do.
like,
It's like a mosquito right before they bite you.
he's not gonna look at like the sign on the door and be like, damn it,
Fuck, foiled
says
again.
women. I'll try again next time.
It's like Boots or like what is it? Swiper from
Freaking
Dora.
swiper, no swiping.
No swiping. You just
He's
gotta
like,
put
"Aw,
women
man."
only. We're safe.
So in the same respect, there's not a man that will suddenly be like, I'm a non-man without doing the work and be like, I'm a lesbian. Like people who are doing that are trolling online. People who are doing that are actually are actually men who identify as men who are homophobes that are saying, I'm a lesbian now by your definition, blah 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 blah.
What are you gonna
And it's
do
like,
about it?
well, nothing. Like you can
Nothing, dude.
you
Like,
can literally
If you want to be a woman and be in the space, go for it.
Then-
Queen. Like,
yeah, queen slay. But I don't think that people who actually identify as non-men, who also identify as lesbians, are people who are not doing the work.
Yeah.
You know,
I
like
think there's an element of good faith that has to be involved.
absolutely,
right?
and it comes from like this fear, but it also means that you are not trusting of the queer community and like people doing the work. You have to just like let it go.
Yeah.
And just trust that the queer community we're here like for each other. And if somebody isn't, then they're not queer. You know what I mean?
Exactly. I really resonate with that. I think there's a few points. One, just even the infighting in the comments you mentioned. I think being a lesbian is about unity, actually, and not fighting. So if you're fighting in the comment, that's not very lesbian of you, actually. Which isn't to say fighting against patriarchy and systems of oppression isn't also lesbian, but I think we need to also see each other. So much of like second wave feminism rhetoric and rhetoric around like not like separating ourselves from manhood so much actually only furthers the marginalization and disenfranchisement of transgender, transsexual people. Because at the end of the day, many women still go home to their husbands and do whatever, or are partners to men, enjoy benefits. There are good men out there, dare I say. All three of them.
The three.
They're just three.
count them
one
on
of them's
one
a
hand.
dog. But I think so much of this interest in separating us from manhood is a trauma response to the oppression we face. And we have seen in the ways that like neo spellings of woman, like woman and woman with a Y, were meant to separate women from men, but functionally only furthered trans people's access to women's spaces. We see this thing as this like ontological evil, manhood, that is so different to us that we can't see the gap in the middle of the people either trying to join or live comfortably within it. People who don't fall within the understanding of cisgendered expressions of gender are then punished for. It's like, oh, well, you haven't been on hormones long enough and you got a 5 o'clock shadow. So I thought men weren't allowed in this space. Bitch, I'm wearing a skirt. And a skirt isn't what makes me a woman or anyone else for that matter, but I think it's the fact that we all understand that we're in the space. I think we can also extend more kindness. The interest in separating ourselves from manhood only furthers to separate ourselves from our own masculinity that is latent within us. It's the qualities that we need to, not necessarily punish, but also not pedestal. And my last point, I think, is just referring to like the non-men. I do hear the interest in not using that definition insofar as we should be more than who we're not.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I also do think that like functionally it does work.
Yeah.
And I think, lesbian is nebulous to define in some ways. It comes from the island of Lesbos in the same way where it's like lesbianism is like an aura in a room.
I don't know if I love non-men attracted to non-men. I feel like it just doesn't even roll off the tongue
it's like
that great.
I don't really get turned on by it.
No,
personally.
no.
But I understand why it happened.
Yeah. I don't know if I love it. I wonder if there's something around the word sapphic that we could use. You know what I mean? That feels like more inclusive of like something around like sapphic love. I don't know. I'm not good at words, as we've established.
If I just feel like you're a lesbian, then
Yeah.
it's all good.
I used to, when I first came out of the closet, I used to only date like very butch and masculine people because I presented really feminine, and it felt like as I was going from dating men to starting to date women, like that felt like comfortable to me because I didn't really know how to like take the lead in relationships, and I expected a masculine lesbian to be able to do that, which I think like, I don't know, over time you unlearn that. And I think coming into like a non-binary identity, I've also like unlearned a lot of things as well. But I've over the years have expanded my type and have dated people who had experiences with people who are
Expanding my type.
have expanded my type
Inclusive.
to like, I don't know, I've unpacked the gender roles and I've realized I'm attracted to like many different types of people. And the thing is, I think a sapphic experience you have with anyone who like identifies as sapphic. It was even like the very romantic and poetic way that you were describing it of like, I felt like that was even a great definition of a lesbian. It's like, it's the yearning. It's like this like romantic softness. It's like, it's not only that, but it's also like that feels like a core element
kind of
of
is
it.
that.
There's,
Yeah.
I don't know, like it's a complex layered experience, and you do feel it no matter whether it's a femme for femme relationship, a mass. I've never done mass for mass, but like I don't know.
I don't know, like even if you're having rough sex, when it's sapphic, it's still like a connection of souls. I feel like there's no level of like whether you're rough or like really, really soft or like anything in between. It's always like this, like, let's merge.
Which is why
It's
all the
always
straight
that.
sex I've had has still been gay. Which is to say,
I would say the same.
I would say that as someone who has perhaps had the privilege of having sex in every single way, both, like straight sex on both sides and then also gay sex on, no, I didn't have gay sex on that side. Anyways, I had a lot of gay sex and straight sex technically. I would say there's almost a quality of straight sex that's very much like base instincts as well as like mutual passion, like mutual pleasure, where it's like, this only works when we're both enjoying it, like on a surface level. Whereas like I find with queer relationships, queer intimacy, if we're talking about sex in it, it's like there's almost an interest in putting your partner's pleasure above yours.
Feeling
Yes.
pleasure.
And that's the pleasure that
that
you
is
really
the
get.
pleasure.
I feel
100%.
like that's a very queer quality of intimate lesbian love.
I think that is very lesbian.
Where it's like,
100%.
I don't have, I'm getting off of the fact that you're getting off because
Yeah.
I want you to be happy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like so much of like straightness is like, we're just got to get this like thing out of us, like we just got to and move on.
I think some people, like not everyone fits in that box for sure. Like I think there's some people who are just like love to please other people no matter what their gender
Well,
or
I'm sorry, you're
sexuality
gay
is. Yeah. Yeah. But I do think that is a very lesbian trait as well though, is like being turned on by someone else's pleasure.
Yeah,
It's
more,
enjoying others' joy.
more.
It's loving women.
I would say-
you know what I mean, in that kind of a way.
I would say more so than you being touched yourself. For me, at least,
agree.
that's
Stone
my-
butches are part of the lesbian paradigm.
But even if you're not, like Don't get me wrong. I love being touched.
I mean, shout out to the pillow princesses as well. It's like sometimes that maybe is not your experience, but
So
yeah.
went through a period where like I didn't have sex for a couple of years. And,
Yeah.
you know, recently this winter started having sex again. So I've been having like a variety of casual experiences. But I did have my first pillow princess experience.
Nice.
Where I was
You were the pillow princess?
No, I was giving the whole time.
Okay.
And I've been really sitting on it. I don't know if it's my favorite, but I think, you know, the sapphic surface top part of me was like willing to give. But it was a very
You said
interesting
you really
experience.
liked it. I don't know.
Yeah, I liked it. It was
Sometimes
different.
It's nice to
I'm
be
open.
selfish.
Yeah.
The thing is, I don't know if this is like a bit, what's it called when you just like hate men?
Misandry.
Misandry. This might be like the misandry within me, but like when I hook up with men, like it can turn me on to be a pillow princess and like only receive and not give anything back to them because it just feels like, it's like very satisfying. That sounds evil. I'm working on the man hating, maybe.
Okay.
So just like, please me, get out.
Like I feel more dom in that sense when someone else is pleasing me and like I don't necessarily want to return the favor when you're with men, and that can turn me on. But I wouldn't do that in a sapphic dynamic.
You better not.
It wouldn't turn me on in that way. You know what I'm saying? Like not being a giver in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we have a clean definition for lesbian yet, but I do like the points that we touched on.
I think we got a good brain map going on.
You know, we're mapping here. I don't think being a lesbian inherently has to do with sex, right?
No, it does not.
It's just beyond that. And I think it's good that we
I think
touched on that
it's
point.
before that.
Exactly. The loving women so much that you are going to like die if you can't like give that love.
Simp for life.
Yeah, there is definitely something that precedes the physical intimacy that is a quality of lesbianism that is inherent to it. I think it's both a defiance of normative expectations and also an interest in joy through sharing ourselves. You know, I think those are two big pillars for me of lesbianism. Yeah. But I'm interested to hear what you think, Eirene.
You know, I just think about the nuances of, okay, our gender expressions, maybe what we desire sexually, maybe what we desire in relationships. Yeah. And I think about sex workers who maybe present in a certain way to a certain like demographic of people, but really in real life, what they desire and their relationships look really different. Just where we are now, I feel like we can just be authentic about how we want to express ourselves sexually, the sex that we want to have, and how our relationships look like.
I wonder if like academics then need to start to deconstruct the expansiveness potentially of the word woman. It can mean many different things to different people and include many different people. Because I think the way we're talking about it is like, yes, like it is a love for women, you know what I mean? And that resonates deeply with all of us while still acknowledging that there's at least two people who don't feel like we resonate with the gender binary at this table. You know what I'm saying? It's like, but I don't feel like put off by that, by the term like woman loving woman. Does that make sense?
It's like an umbrella almost, right?
So confusing.
An umbrella, you know.
How many more umbrellas do we have?
Walking down the street, you know, being perceived as a lesbian couple.
How about we just don't define it and we just leave it open-ended?
Well, one thing I would even like to put in before we go there, which I agree with, is maybe even it's a quality of having experienced womanhood in some capacity and then also loving those who have experienced that.
Okay.
Oh, that's really great.
I kind of really like that.
Yeah. I'm into that.
I'm into it.
Hire me for your gender definitions.
I have a heavy flow, and it's actually super annoying when I go to bed with a tampon in or a Diva cup, and I wake up to a bloody mess because it's leaked everywhere. Now, period underwear like Isle has actually been such a huge game changer for me because now I can get a restful sleep and wake up without any mess.
Today's episode is brought to you by Isle, the original period underwear company. Proudly queer-owned, Isle has been leading the way in sustainable period care since 1993, redefining what period products can do for you and the planet for nearly 3 decades.
Let's talk about their Boost Boxer. Now, this is a period underwear like you've never experienced before. The Boost Boxer is a reliable, comfortable, and inclusive style option for everybody. Yes, everybody. Whether you're on the go, working from home, or looking for overnight protection that you can count on, this boxer brief is designed to move with you.
So what makes it so special, you might ask? First, it's made with sustainable fabrics that are breathable and leak-proof, so you stay comfortable and dry all day long. It's made for the heaviest of flows. The leak-proof gusset is sewn from the front of the waistband all the way to the back, while the removable boost liner lets you customize your absorbency level, giving you extra protection when you need it most. And unlike some other reusable period products, the Boost Boxer is PFAS free and designed to keep you feeling fresh with no leaks.
And as if the underwear wasn't good enough, another reason why we love Isle so much is because they are a certified B Corp. That means that they're held to some of the highest standards for social and environmental responsibility. It's period care that you can feel good about, literally and figuratively.
So why settle for less when you can have it all? Inclusive styles, comfort, sustainability, and performance. Head to periodisle.com and use code QueerCollective for 15% off. Isle, sustainable period products for every body.
Thank you, Isle, for sponsoring this episode.
So how do you think the wider lesbian community feels towards trans and non-binary lesbians?
My DMs are popping.
Oh.
Oh my gosh. I feel like my DMs might be popping after this
My
is
DMs
published.
are quiet. So
You think the wider community is feeling positively towards trans and non-binary lesbians?
I think in my day-to-day, in the people I engage with, people just see me as who I bring, you know? Like, I don't think that there's... Like, my transness is a fundamental part of me, but it's not the only part of me. Maybe in the past, it's been a little bit more hostile, but honestly, I've never really experienced it directly. It's been more like comment sections of this or that, or this person's like this. I think it's a lot of, again, that kind of interest in dividing us.
Coming on the internet.
Because our strength is in our unity, you know, and in our interest in being there for each other and seeing each other. An inherent part of the problem is a representation issue. Trans people make up 1%, maybe 2% at best of populations.
And yet they're like the biggest dominating issue.
And you know who else makes up 1%? Fucking billionaires. Boom, roasted. Yeah, so those people, they point the finger at us because, well, one, so many people don't even have a person in their life who's trans, you know, or maybe doesn't even know that they're trans. So they don't, when they hear stuff on the media about these, dare I say, boogeymen, this caricature of transness, they're like, that's all they have to go off of.
I think it's very easy also to pick on 1% of the population because you don't have very much voting power. You don't have like power in numbers. You know what I'm saying? So it's like if you're attacking like a really big demographic of people, that's probably going to be a bigger political problem. Yeah. You know?
Like gay, queer people make up 10 to 15. Yeah. You know, which still isn't that much either.
Yeah.
Shout out my DL Kings. We see you, even if you can't be seen. You know, like there is more to it. It's the same thing with like the left-handedness, you know, which left-handed representation.
Same.
Wow.
So yeah, I think in my day-to-day in Toronto, in the people I engage with online, there is very much a care, interest, and love for trans people. I think a lot of it is also in response to that negativity and that anti-trans sentiment is then the over supportive, which can sometimes be dangerous too. Again, that pedestaling that can happen, that kind of quality of
goddess.
Yes, it's like yes, queen, you can do no wrong. Yes, that's slay, boots, slay, doll, this, and
doll.
it's like. Yes, and I think it's more than just, you know, being a fierce ally with a capital A. It's like, you know, understanding that like, hey, maybe like don't out me to the organization because my transness isn't really part of this grievance. You know what I mean? Even though you mean well. A big part of transphobia and tackling it is one, the representation in demographics, and two, the most visible of us are the ones just beginning their journey. So many of us who get that media spotlight, that attention, you know, are just a year in, 2 years in, and like it's tough being in that early transition. It's a chasm that you have to face, and you know this is where the "you're so brave" parts comes in, because it's like you're also often platformed because, well, maybe you're losing work, so you have to kind of push yourself as this identity to then get more work, but then you become this thing that's an identity before a person.
You know, the lesbians I used to hang out with in Vancouver, you know, I've lost touch with a lot of them, and you know, since moving, community spaces have changed. But I remember going to softball league tournament. So in Vancouver, there's Maple League. It's the women's, mostly lesbian softball league, and I remember sitting there and observing and like, you know, reuniting, seeing some old faces and seeing the inclusion that was going on amongst the team. So lots of non-binary trans folks like on those teams side by side. You know, for me, I've been very low key about being non-binary. You know, I play in a band that identifies as all women, and you know, I shapeshift. You know, breaking the binary and going back and forth. So I haven't really experienced, a lot of pushback or say a comment about butch flight, for example, which that rhetoric exists. I had read texts by trans exclusionary radical feminists such as Janice Raymond and Sheila Jeffries. And in Vancouver, there's a very prominent TERF named Megan Murphy who recently ran for the PPC. I think it's Janice Raymond has one text specifically about trans masculinity. And it just comes from a place of like just straight up hate and not really centering that person's experience, and very much, a hatred for men, and wanting to have like this narrow definition of lesbianism and womanhood. So I guess where I'm going with that is, where is your heart in all of this?
I agree. Like, this might be us being in our Toronto bubble as well. That's part of this. Not everyone lives in such like an inclusive city. I feel like nowadays, so many people who would just be kind of excluded from general society now have the ability to like put a microphone in front of themselves or broadcast their thoughts over the internet to a large group of people. And now these really fringe ideas that would be like rejected by the general community are now put on a platform for other people with other motivations to now use for like fear-mongering reasons or whatever, to use this person as an example, like someone who's detransitioned, for example. It's a lot of noise, and it's not actually really that beneficial within the community to be even paying attention to
house. The call is coming from outside the house. One thing I will say is that like detransitioning is still a trans experience. Like they are still part of the trans community. So much of the issue around transness and bodies and gender expansiveness is about policing. So, we can't advocate for body liberation and queer liberation while also then admonishing detransitioners, which we're not doing here, just to be clear. I think it's more the fact that there's an astroturfing quality of like these very small representations, like detransitioners make up 1% of trans people who are 1% of the population, are then platformed, and there's money put behind it to then spread it to people and be like, well, see, these people regret it, so you can't do
spread
it.
a bad narrative that sometimes that person doesn't even want to spread.
Hip replacement surgeries have a regret rate of 15%, whereas like transition related surgeries have a regret rate of lower than 1%, which is partially informed by the medical gatekeeping. And gatekeeping was invented as a term to describe the barriers trans women face in the medical industry to access gender affirming care. There is this kind of, we're getting politics involved in a medical conversation,
I feel like the broader queer community, and you can see this just for examples at Pride events, like at the Dyke March, the like official Dyke March that was happening at Toronto Pride, they're handing out loads of gender nonconforming flags. Like, this is something that is widely agreed upon within our community, that this is within the lesbian label, and anything that is happening outside of it is a fringe thought that like all of us as like an inclusive community are agreeing that we reject that idea, and for the people who are platforming it, fuck yourself.
That's idea of like collective liberation.
100%. So this next section that I want to jump into is around dating and intimacy. So whether you like it or not, trans and non-binary lesbians exist. And not only that, they're a growing segment of our community. So in the last year, the dating app field has seen a 53% growth in users identifying as trans and non-binary lesbians.
That's hot.
What are our biggest challenges with dating within the lesbian community as trans and non-binary lesbians?
I mean, I'm happily in a relationship that's monogamish. So I'm not like I'm not looking for anything. So I think I'm pretty content. Shout out my T for T lesbian love. I'd say it's awkward. I hate dating apps personally. It's more just like, I think my ADD plus my like inherent quality of just connecting more people in person just makes it really hard to like take away that, I guess, even the plausible deniability of flirting. It's like, will we, won't we, do we, don't we, into that direct like, oh, I like you, you like me. And I don't think that like the online dating inherently is like a barrier. I think it's more of like skill issue on my part. For me, I think it goes back to that kind of protectionism of kind of walling myself off a bit. And for me, I've always been more of a, can we be friends?
Let's be friends first.
Like can we actually have something
like,
that's
make
more
sure
than
you're a
like
good
the
person.
fucking, you know, because like the fucking's great, but for me, I don't know, I'm a bit of a lesbian in that like I need there to be like a very like burning passion inside of me. Otherwise, it's like the body stuff gets a little weird.
I really echo what you said about, like presentation. And for me, it's the pressure to be really masculine. I have a hard time actually even landing dates.
Right.
I actually haven't, leading up to my last relationship, I didn't date much and didn't have much luck on apps, dealt a lot with like rejection, spent a lot of years alone and had like the scarcity mentality when it came to dating. And now,
Of
that
like
I'm
feeling like you needed someone.
yeah, or
like you had to
feeling
lock
like
it down.
Or
I
like
had to
nobody
lock it
was
down.
gonna-
Yeah, no one was, desiring me. So like I struggle a lot with desirability. And now that I'm, I understand more about like how race and culture come into play and like, fat phobia, how I walk spaces as an Asian person, as specifically a Filipino person, Filipinx person, really shapes that. Can I cook?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can cook. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you cook some Filipino dishes?
I can try. Yeah, if I tried. Yeah, definitely.
Give me some lumpia.
Hit 'em up in the
stat.
DM.
Hit me up. Open. I'm really open.
And you're musical and you're smart.
I am, yeah.
You have a lot of incredible qualities.
I write some really good. I'm really good at writing cards, and very supportive. I'm a triple Taurus.
Knows how to shoot a gun.
That's so
hot.
wow.
Do you really
Gun.
know how to shoot a gun?
Yes,
You're so grounded.
Bad.
very ex-military. Can be
Taurus.
grounded.
Yes.
Can be grounded.
Taurus. Holy
So, anyways, we're
triple
not trying
Taurus
to
as well.
use this low key. Not trying to use this podcast as a way to
Well, I'm
get more
trying to-
dates.
But get in those DMs.
Hit up my friend.
See, I think my challenge with dating is even just landing a date. Maybe some assumptions that are made about me, being Asian, like maybe not masculine enough.
Yeah.
And there have been times where I feel like I've had crushes on people, and then I suddenly see them like dating like a white mask person, and I find myself like comparing myself to that person and like feeling not enough. Though that kind of like internal like sense of self-worth has been a challenge. And now that I'm dating again, what I'm facing is age, being older. Now that I'm in my late 30s, like, oh my gosh, dating pool is much smaller, and approaching people in spaces or
Are
even
you
on
willing
apps.
to date a Gen Z?
Oh my.
Oh, yes, and I have been,
Are you flirting?
and we can talk later.
I'm asking for the audience. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very open to dating all ages. Well, 20,
for
All legal
25,
ages.
all legal ages.
Legal ages.
Nice
Age of
try,
consent.
Drake.
Yeah, so now like I've just noticed that I'm bringing my age limit lower and lower.
Yeah.
But also like able to find connection. So, I do feel self-consciousness, and again that's just all me. But also, yeah, I don't know, I'm just on this journey. And literally I'm just 3 months into dating.
Yeah.
Again, after 2 years.
Is there any challenge that you feel like in terms, well, I guess what you said was not feeling masculine enough, actually.
Yeah,
is like being more
assumptions too.
androgynous in these spaces, like potentially even the connection to these identity labels of like feeling like you maybe have to fit into like butch, which was a
Absolutely.
label that you
Totally.
mentioned earlier.
Yeah, within relationships, within
Yeah.
dating, I feel this pressure to be really butch. If I'm dating someone, like say who's more femme, I feel like I have to like play that trope. I'll start out like, really grounded, really calm, chivalrous, paying for everything, like topping maybe.
Paying for everything.
Yeah,
You're
paying for everything.
In this
tend to-
economy?
I tend to pay, yeah.
We gotta
Yeah.
talk about that.
If you like to pay for someone else, I think there's also, it can be your love language to want
That's
to
true.
give gifts and like take care of someone. Like that doesn't necessarily have to be tied to gender roles either. Like if that's just a way that you like to show affection to someone, that can still be okay, even if we've unpacked everything.
It depends on where it's coming from. So I
Yes.
did go on a date recently where like a coffee date where she paid first, and it wasn't even like a question. She was very much like, I got this, I'm gonna pay. But I don't know if that was just coming from an anxious place, that because she was late, 10 minutes and
Right.
kept me waiting. So it depends. If I pick up on that someone doesn't want to be taken care of, and that's why they're paying, then that's a bit, of a flag for me. I like to pay because I want to
What
gauge
color
if
flag?
Red.
Really? Why?
Yeah, because I want to gauge if someone wants to be taken care of.
Oh, you like
is
taking care of
comfortable being
people?
taken care of.
Is that what you're into?
Yeah, or like want it to be reciprocated in some way. So and for me, like as a masculine person,
Right.
I usually like to pay first. Yeah.
Okay, so it's more of a preference, and you want to see if somebody wants to be taken care of because you like taking care of them.
Yes.
Okay.
And then to see like how that care would be reciprocated to me.
I wanted to amend my own response too, because I think there's just a mental block
I want to
where
make
I'm
amends.
just like, I forget about chasers because I'm like,
Chasers,
don't
yes.
talk to me,
Yeah.
don't look at me. And chaser, if you're unfamiliar, those watching,
Yes.
it's kind of a person that fetishizes transness, but it's not exclusive to transness. You could be a chaser. Yellow fever, for example. That same thing you were alluding to of like Asian women being sought after. Fetishization. A lot of my kind of apprehension towards dating is kind of like, I don't really put like that I'm trans first and foremost. You know, like if I put it there, then that becomes the overarching conversation narrative. It's like, oh, you're trans. So do you have have you got the, what's it like there? You know, which is why I keep saying like, I want to be friends first, because it's like, well, do you even care about me as a person?
Do you
or am I just a
yearn
thing?
for me?
Do you yearn for me?
Yeah, show me you can yearn.
Do you stay up at night thinking about my body, touching your body, and writing a symphony?
Yeah.
The hands do so much.
You can't control what other people do or how other people perceive you, but you can control how you handle yourself. And I think that all just comes down to confidence in yourself. I certainly have my days, even majority of my days, where I'm like, don't always see myself as an attractive person. However, when I go on a date or I go to like an event where there's other queers there, I like hype myself up.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, I got this. I'm attractive. I'm confident. I am desired by all. Like, and that's the story that I tell myself, especially if I'm going on a date with someone, because I'm like, you would not want to go on a date with me if you didn't find me attractive. So I'm going to be the most attractive person that I can possibly be. But that all really comes from like my confidence, right? It's about how I speak to them. It's about my mannerisms. It's about how I carry myself. As they say, it is cliche, but you know, confidence is one of the most attractive qualities. So in terms of questioning yourself, I think that if you told yourself, perhaps, it's like, I am desirable, I am this, I am that, then the other person might perceive that as well.
I'm learning that. Yeah. I really struggle with that,
Yeah.
with confidence for sure. Like, you know, in these dates that I'm having and even interactions with friends, just I have this burning desire and I want to reach out and say and express things. But I hold back and working through it.
I understand it. I have issues with social anxiety as well, where I just get in my head so much, like telling myself like I don't have interesting things to say, or just like over analyzing what interactions I have after when I come home.
Yeah.
And I saw this one video online where someone said telling yourself the opposite, it could be equally as true. You know what I mean? Like you're coming up with all of these reasons why these people don't think like you're interesting or cool or likable, or why you're not attractive. But you could also just easily, like, I guess even like, it's not even gaslighting if it could be true. You know what I mean? I think sometimes
It's modern lighting.
It's modern light. Sometimes these negative thoughts are kind of like negatively gaslighting yourself into like thinking that you're this like bad person when you're not even that.
That's
you know, and no one even like perceives you that way.
That's
you know?
true. Yeah, like you could easily tell yourself, you're ugly, you're not confident, you don't have interesting things to say, this person doesn't actually like you, et cetera, et cetera.
Or you just tell yourself a different story.
Or you could do the opposite.
Yeah.
And that, both things could be equally as true in theory.
I've had such a hard time just having people be attracted to me, because again, growing up in a heteronormative cisgender context is like, well, you're supposed to make the first move, you're supposed to do this. I don't know if I got good at it. I definitely built the capacity to do it.
Yeah.
So then whenever people were into me, well, first of all, if people were ever into me before I transitioned, I was like, how dare you? This is not me, first of all. Like, it felt gross, because it's like,
Okay.
but this isn't like even my true self. Like,
Right.
how can you like someone that's not even who they are? Thinking I have the capacity to be desirable. You know what I mean? Like believing that, like every day I receive psychic damage from Reddit about how people like me aren't desirable. You know what I mean? Or something about us being banned in another place. I think I do a good job of insulating myself from that, but it's still like present, you know? Like even in the work I do with like trans youth, it's like if I don't receive it, they're going to go to school and someone's going to say that dumb shit to them, and then we are all going to have to process together. It's tough, but I think what I look for more than anything else is companionship. I think all of it is fun, but what I really seek and I guess yearn for is companionship, being someone who I can like share my day with, someone who I can like finish my day and like share a meal, and we don't have to talk, or we can talk till the cows go home. You know, it's about someone who can match my freak emotionally.
An audience member shared that unpacking envy versus attraction to women brought up some big realizations for them. They shared that they realized that they've always loved women in a way that other lesbians do, and that it was distinctly different than the way that men do. And I'm wondering, J. Marie,
That's me.
was unpacking envy versus attraction ever part of your experience?
It's complicated. I think I alluded to it in the beginning of like the way I experienced attraction to women even before transitioning was queer in context. It wasn't about ownership. It wasn't about domination. Not that that's the only narratives that straight relationships can have. But it was like loving the softness, loving the authenticity, loving the fact that like these people, women, were fully realized versions of themselves. I think that's the most attractive women to me are like ones who have like maxed out their skill tree of just like quirks and accessories and personality traits and all these things.
Bobble maxing.
One could say.
Yeah.
As I approached my transition, it was getting confusing. I think a lot of women that I was attracted to in my journey were both attractive, but then also like qualities that I wanted within myself but couldn't see myself expressing, like I wasn't allowed to. But I do think it is a bit of a trap sometimes to talk about envy versus attraction in specifically the context of trans femininity, because it is also a common talking point with like TERF circles of just like, for example, Ray Blanchard, the king daddy of trans misogyny, coined terms like homosexual transsexual and autogynephilic transsexual, which is basically saying the top and bottoms of trans women. It's like, oh, were you a gay boy before you transitioned? Well, you're a homosexual transsexual. Oh, you're attracted to women? Well, it's autogynephilia because you're actually fetishizing your own body. Has long been debunked, but you know, sometimes the girls make jokes about it in our safe spaces. Envy and attraction, I think more so than anything else, like as this thing that's focused on trans, I think we all kind of deal with it as lesbians. Absolutely. Where it's like, do I want to be you or do I want to be with you? Or do I want to fuck you? You know?
I feel it all the time.
Yeah. So every day when I write my symphonies. Yes, and is kind of my answer. It was like there was an element of it, but I think that's just an inherent part of becoming.
Yeah. And I think definitely even if you're just like mask for mask or femme for femme, I think you're gonna experience that probably is like you're wanting to be that person and you want to fuck that person, and it can be both.
No.
Well, you date femmes though in your mask, so you couldn't say.
And I'm out of the conversation.
You couldn't comment. But
I mean, I feel that about, you know, masculinity. Like, you know, at home, my roommate has this giant Tom of Finland poster. And I'm like, do I want to be you or do I want to fuck you?
Yeah. I feel like that circles back to what you were saying about your potential bisexuality, but feeling unsure about your connection with men. And that kind of piece is like, ooh, unpacking the envy versus attraction.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Talk to me in a few months.
Yeah.
We'll have to follow up.
Yeah. I also think that like any connection or relationship you have is like, if you really love someone, you're going to take a lot of their like mannerisms and things. Like I think like copying someone is also like a great form of affection that some people do, is like, if you really love someone, I don't know, like over the course of a long-term relationship, sometimes you become each other.
I love seeing elder lesbian couples who look the same. The same hair, the same jacket, but in different colors. Yeah. It's very, very endearing.
It's because you just love each other and you love the same things. What advice do you have for fellow trans and non-binary lesbians who are trying to date and put themselves out there?
Join a monastery, practice 3 years of celibacy, start again. That was what I did basically. Like I was straight up like celibate for like the first 2 or 3 years of my transition. I don't think that's necessarily what you should do. I think that was me protecting myself again. And just, I moved from Trinidad to come here. I didn't really have like, oh, I found my queer people. I went to high school with, no, I had to like from scratch build my community. So for me, that's what I did, was just kind of like a protectionism of like, I just need to focus on myself, watering the flower that is me to the point that I can bloom and then become someone worth dating, you know? And obviously things can get ahead of that. There were still crushes I had, unrequited loves and whatnot. I think a lot of it, it's don't worry about finding someone you want to date. Worry about being someone you'd want to date, you know? Like, I think that's going to bear more fruit and be more beautiful in the end, because you can pour so much of yourself into someone and they can leave. But everything you pour into yourself, you get back.
That's true.
Just like water your garden.
It's facts, and you'll attract the people who
are meant for you will come.
Yeah, I mean, I agree completely with like doing that self-work before you even start dating. So just setting good intentions and really questioning, why are you dating? Are you looking for a mommy? probably shouldn't be dating.
Yeah.
Because that
But
was
if you
me.
are.
And I learned my
Hit us
lesson. Not specifically a mommy, but like looking for a partner to feel whole and to feel like, I needed a relationship to validate being queer, being a lesbian. I'm gay, I'm queer, like, well, I can have this like monogamous relationship and then get married and like have the house and have the kids too and be seen as like a normal acceptable gay. So just really question your intentions before you even start dating. And going back to that authenticity, like, what do you like as a person? Who are the types of people you like? What are you attracted to? What do you desire? And making sure that's all in alignment.
Really date yourself to the point where you are starting to love yourself. You become such an interesting person. It's like, how can you ignore how cool you are?
I would say also take that risk. Like, if you like her, if you like them, just maybe tell them.
Make a move.
Kiss them with their consent, of course.
Yes.
But don't be afraid if that's like your desire. Just go for it.
Yeah.
Take the risk.
The worst that can happen is someone says no and then you keep it pushing.
Move on. Looking and desiring for people to fill gaps in your life, and then versus being open to what life brings to you and who comes into your life. It's like it's one thing to like be looking for your mommy dom vibes, but then ultimately you're just projecting what you want onto people. Whereas if you're open to people coming into your life, someone can have a little bit of mommy dom energy that they can bring to you, but they're also maybe a little butch, maybe a little daddy once in a while, and there's space for that multitude. It's the same thing of like treating people as the projections within your own mind versus like letting people come into your life and be their full selves, because ultimately you need to bring your full self and you have to give someone else the space to bring their full self. And that's where the lesbian commiseration really hits off.
And I think there's going to be people who see you for who you truly are and people who don't. And it's just about finding those people. And according to Field, it's bisexuals. Bisexuals are going to be the
bisexual.
It's always bisexual.
So on Field, the top people trans and non-binary lesbians are connecting with are queer women, queer non-binaries, bisexual women, pansexual women, and non-binary pansexuals and non-binary bisexuals. Shout out to the bisexuals, your key dating market.
Yeah.
They like everyone.
Can't wait to see how the comments evolve in this one.
Well, that's a great place to end it.
Yeah.
So thank you both so much for
you
joining
so
us
much.
today and for all of your time. Anything that you want to plug? Where can people find you? What are you up to?
Sure, yeah. So you can follow me personally at Slow Mask or my music at Louis Sanchez Music.
You can follow me on Instagram at Pothound, but also if you want to keep up to date with the stuff I do at my community center, you can look at G. Chavallo Center. And yeah, I do a lot of community programming this Wednesday, which will be a bit too soon for this podcast. We'll be having a trans marketing panel. We're going to have an endocrinologist and a surgeon who specialize in trans healthcare doing an information session, navigating like initial stages of medical transition, what to expect, what's reversible, what's not, whether or not boys go to Jupiter to get stupider before or after transition.
So thank you so much for tuning in. And if you want to dive deeper into some lesbian content, we have an episode dedicated to the great lesbian divide, butch versus femme. You can check that out. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe. And if you're listening on your favorite podcast app, make sure to leave us a 5-star review because it really does help the channel out. That's everything that we got for you. And until next time, peace.